Right, so here's first question. While I welcome the Water Special Measures Bill becoming law, I would like to know how Ofwat will enforce these recommendations, hold offenders to account and ensure financial equity of services. So the Water Special Measures Bill is a new piece of law that we passed at the beginning of this year, and it gives the regulator the power they need to ban those unfair, undeserved multi-million-pound bonuses that the water bosses were awarding themselves for overseeing failure. I just felt determined that they shouldn't be allowed to profit from pollution in the way that they have been before. And how Ofwat will enforce these recommendations. Well, we've increased sentences under that law as well. And if you are the boss of a water company who is not complying with the law, you can go to prison for up to 5 years. What are the government planning to do to clean up pesticides and microplastics in our water? Yeah, I understand the problem with this one. Pesticides, of course, contribute to pollution, and we're all worried about microplastics. So we're banning the use of wet wipes. There's a horrible thing down near Putney where there's a big, it looks like a rock formation. Actually, it's just loads and loads of wet wipes that have accumulated along the side of the river. And we're reducing the use of pesticides. We banned bee killing pesticides, for instance, so that they can't be used, therefore that doesn't run off into the water. And we set last October the biggest ever budget in our country's history for nature positive sustainable farming and food production. How will you ensure that the money raised from customers is invested in infrastructure to make our rivers and seas clean instead of paying bosses and shareholders? Now, there's a really, really good point, because people are furious at the amount of money that's come out of the system over previous years and gone into bonuses and dividends rather than paying for upgrading the water infrastructure. And because of that, the pipes are crumbling and then you get more sewage in our waterways. So we've done a couple of things there. First of all, we've changed the law, passed a new law called the Water Special Measures Act earlier this year, which gives the regulator new powers to ban the payment of those unfair, undeserved multi-million-pound bonuses. So that will make a big difference. But secondly, we've ring-fenced the money that is from customers and that is earmarked for investment, so it cannot ever again be diverted for payment on dividends and bonuses in the way that it was under the previous government. How will you ensure that the water companies are able to meet the increasing demand for water as the population increases and our climate is changing? That's a really, really good point. We're looking to build as a government 1.5 million new homes. They all need drinking water. And when we were elected last year, we were told that by the mid-2030s, the demand for clean drinking water starts to outstrip supply. So we would have had to start looking at rationing. But what we've done instead is we've worked with the water companies. We've secured over £104 billion of private sector investment, and that will be used to build new water infrastructure all over the country so that we can upgrade our water pipes. It reduces pollution as well, incidentally, but it makes sure that there will be enough clean drinking water for the new homes that we need to build, as well as for the homes that already exist. Why are our bills increasing after shareholders have been paid dividends instead of reinvesting? Now, that's a really good point, because water bills just went up by a very high percentage, and I'm furious about that, as I'm sure many people are who have seen a similar thing with their water bills. The reason that happened is because if you ever see a crack in the wall of your house and you leave it for 10 years, it gets far worse and it costs much more to fix. I can make sure it never happens again. That's why we're changing the regulations to tighten up the system so that can't happen again. And we've secured that £104 billion investment, so we've got the money to start to pay to upgrade those water pipes and then maintain them properly, rather than letting them crumble again like the previous government did. Will the government consider bringing the water industry back into public ownership? And if not, why not? Well, the answer to that is no. And the reasons are, first of all, to buy out the existing companies would cost over £100 billion of public money. So we'd be taking tax off people just to hand it to the people that have made such a mess of our water system. And it's a vast amount of money. You'd have to cut education and the health service to do it. But secondly, it wouldn't actually fix the problem. We've already got nationalised water company in Scotland. They've got very similar problems with sewage. The problems are around regulation and governance. So what the water companies have got away with, not who owns the water company. So we're fixing that problem so that we can get on and clean up our waterways as fast as we possibly can. What are your priorities in regulating the water companies? Well, that's really straightforward, because we've inherited a situation where we've got record amounts of sewage and other pollution in our rivers, lakes and seas, and my priority is to clean it up. And there's two real reasons how that has happened. One is that regulation was too weak and toothless. So we've passed the Water Special Measures Bill to give the regulator more powers. I've got the Water Commission underway, looking at how we further strengthen regulation, but also how we can strengthen the regulators. But we've also secured £104 billion of private sector investment to invest in upgrading those sewage pipes and water pipes so we can stop all of that sewage flowing out into our rivers, lakes and seas. We're also, incidentally, working with the farming sector to reduce, it's called runoff from agriculture. So a lot of pollution, about 40% of it comes from agriculture. So we're working for more nature positive ways of farming that reduces pollution in that way, so we clean up the water from that source. Why aren't prison terms imposed on those responsible for polluting rivers? Well, that's a question people were asking me an awful lot. So we passed the Water Special Measures Bill earlier this year. That imposes prison sentences on water bosses for covering up what's going on with pollution. There's other laws and other regulation as well. Water bosses can go to prison for up to 5 years if they don't comply with the law. And I really think the public expect to see accountability for what's going wrong. And if it keeps going wrong, then that means those responsible could find themselves in court. And here's the last question. What action is the government taking to stop water companies and the Environment Agency management failing to stop pollution and supply clean water everywhere as required before profits are extracted from the companies responsible? So this is really a question about the resources the regulators have. And, it was so disappointing that the previous government cut the resources for the main regulator, so they didn't have the resources they needed to get out there and investigate what's going on. We've massively ratcheted up the number of investigations already just in our first 10 months. I think there are 81 criminal investigations underway now. That's double what was going on under the previous government. Obviously, we've increased prison sentences for certain offences as well, and that makes it tighter. But we're also following the polluter pays principle. And that means if the water companies are successfully prosecuted, they pay back the costs of that prosecution, so the regulator has more resources to get on and investigate other breaches and make sure that those who are polluting our waterways are held to account, and that is a deterrent to stop them doing it again in future.